welcome back to the No Score Review Show, where we have in-depth critique and nuanced discussion of some of the latest movies, video games, and television. I'm your host, Nick Green, and today is going to be another solo review where I am giving my spoiler-free thoughts on Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the latest entry and final entry of the DCEU, or DC Extended Universe. It has been exactly 10 years now since the DCEU has kicked off. Man of Steel came out in 2013. So it has officially been a full decade since this whole thing started, and man, what a cinematic universe! It survived long enough to be considered as such, unlike the failed attempt of Universal's Universal Monster Horrorverse. I don't remember what they were calling it. Monsterverse? No, Monsterverse is the Godzilla one. But yeah, it certainly stuck around. It's had a lot of highs and lows, and mostly lows, and a few kind of just like middling, very forgettable, just kind of meh movies overall, with a handful, a very small handful of like good movies and like hits over its 15 movies. I would say I've gone over this with my DCEU franchise in review and my various written reviews on Letterboxd before. But Blue Beetle is kind of in a weird purgatorical state. And yeah, but this is just a weird cinematic universe, and it's finally over. And now we get to just kind of wait in anticipation for James Gunn and Peter Safran to do their take on the DCU, the new DCU, in a couple years. But for now, I'm going to discuss Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. James Wan returns to the director's chair for this film. I think he also had a co-writing credit as well. And the almost entire full cast from the first movie is back. Amber Heard, Jason Momoa, Tamura Morrison, Nicole Kidman, Yahya Abdul-Mateen the second, I think, is his full name. Patrick Wilson as well. And it's actually like most of the creative team behind the camera as well. I believe it's the same cinematographer, same composer for the score, and I think maybe even the same editor, if I am correct. So yeah, it's basically all the same team coming back to tell a new story, and it's a direct sequel to the first film rather. And yeah, it was weird. I did a full rewatch of the DCEU in anticipation of it ending. And as such, I rewatched Aquaman. Aquaman is actually one of the few films that I've actually seen multiple times. Because of this rewatch, I've seen only most of them like twice. But I think Aquaman and Shazam are the two that I've seen like 3+ times now. So yeah, and I was very middling on the first Aquaman when it came out in theaters. I was kind of meh on it over the pandemic when I rewatched it for the first time. This rewatch, though, I came around to it. I actually found a lot to really appreciate about it. It had like a grand scale. It felt very operatic. James Wan's vision for the film felt very singular and very focused, very tangible. You could tell it had his trademark visual style to it. And even he got to play with some of the horror strengths that he has as a filmmaker, which also kind of come back in this film. Definitely nowhere near as much in terms of the scares necessarily, but it's more in the like creature design and the kind of creepy atmosphere that he creates in some scenes. And there's severely less jump scare things, tropes in this entry. That was one of the big negatives a lot of people had, myself included, where, I mean, we say jump scare, but it's just like these hard explosion cuts where people would get cut off mid-sentence with an explosion. That only happens like once in this movie. But I mean, he also kind of points it out. There's like a bit of lampshading there. I know I shook my head at that moment because it was very obvious. And then the fact that he just kind of acknowledges it. I think I've just kind of grown really tired of a lot of lampshading, especially in like big Hollywood blockbusters. It's like, just because you're acknowledging it doesn't make it like okay or clever. Like like it doesn't excuse lazy or bad writing. That was one of the things that still rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, where his kind of horror roots maybe got in the way a little bit more. But yeah, I really liked the first film, and with this sequel, I feel like his vision just kind of got lost. I don't know what it was. It just felt very, no pun intended, but it felt very watered down, a very watered down version of the first film. There's a lot of like flashback stuff using like direct footage from the first film. A lot of time, there's a lot of like catch up. A lot of the dialogue is riddled with exposition once again. They didn't manage to shake that off, although I guess it makes sense if they're bringing back the exact same creative team. This one just felt, it certainly passed that threshold of the DCEU having like bad movies. Like it wasn't garbage, but it kind of fell in that middle area of being just kind of generic superhero slop. There's nothing very remarkable about it. Not even any of there didn't really feel like many unique set pieces or sequences that were really clearly established throughout the film. I also saw this in 3D, and again, this film has kind of just basically reminded me of how much I'm not a fan of 3D anymore. And there's like very few, like basically only James Cameron's Avatar movies have really pulled off the 3D look for me. Now I'm really noticing it hurts my eyes, and especially in like action sequences a lot of the time, it just like lose so much of what's going on screen, and it's so hard to kind of focus on what's happening. That's for me anyway. So that was a major detractor, not necessarily on the film's part, but just the fact that it's being shown in 3D. I really feel like we gotta move past that whole thing. The exposition dialogue is back, and like a lot of the characters are pretty underwritten. Black Manta is the main villain this time around, and he doesn't even really get that much screen time, honestly. And the screen time he does get is like pretty weak in terms of actual development, because his motivations are very straightforward. He wants to get revenge on Aquaman for killing his family. He wants to do the same to him. It's laid out plain and simple in the trailers. But there's like nothing beyond that, and any scene with him is feels very disinterested in exploring that at all. So that was unfortunate. He definitely looks cool this time around. He's got the black trident as well, which is interesting and cool. And the lore behind that is interesting. Again, a lot of the world building is cool with this sequel. All the stuff behind the Lost Kingdom and the like Pirate Cove, the secret or like the sunken citadel or whatever it's called, with all the pirates and stuff, and like having it be this kind of worldly adventure again does like make it feel bigger in a sense, but it just lost a lot of that luster and like specificness to it, um, and yeah, it just made it feel a lot more bland. The only real big character relationship we get is between Arthur and his brother Orm, which is like touched on in the trailers and everything. But even that, I feel like it was kind of watered down. It didn't feel like it was explored nearly as much as it could have been. And this film is just like, it feels like it's embracing the worst that this genre has to offer, in terms of like every character gets their chance to like crack jokes, and it's all that kind of Marvel quippy humor a lot of the time, and it just feels out of place. Like the grandiose scale that James Wan introduced with this film, the first, or with this character in this world, the first film felt very, again, operatic and very like grandiose. And it felt like a great opportunity to kind of embrace, like just fully lean into that kind of hard fantasy setting with like kings and princes and crowns and like trials by combat and stuff like that. But it feels like it's embracing that superhero trope of kind of like, oh, this stuff is kind of weird, I don't understand it, let me just point and laugh at it, basically. to try and get the audience to laugh with them, but it just comes off as like cheap and disingenuous, and yeah, just kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth a little bit. The other big problem I had with this film is how much it just avoids risk. Like no sort of risk is taken, no stakes are really introduced for any sort of substantial development with these characters. There is like a sliver of stakes introduced, like with his family on the line, Arthur's family, and Black Manta wanting to get revenge. But again, like it's just a completely missed opportunity. I don't know what it is about this entry. If there was any sort of studio intervention of just kind of trying to wrap this film up in a nice, happy way, I just don't know the direction this film was headed in, and it just feels very generic overall. Felt like a completely missed opportunity. It's nowhere near the disappointment, I think. It's nowhere near as offensive a disappointment as like Fury of the Gods was for me. Fury of the Gods was a substantial step down from the first movie, the Shazam movie. But this one definitely feels a little bit more consistent in terms of like going from the first film to the second film. It just does feel a little bit watered down at the end of the day. I might ease up on it if I ever decide to rewatch it again. But again, I have no idea when that will be, if ever. Yeah, there really wasn't a ton to like about the film overall. Like, there really wasn't that many notable action sequences that I can really remember. Any sort of interesting concepts or sequences that they introduce feel like they didn't go as like maybe balls to the wall as I was kind of hoping for or expecting. So I think that kind of just took the wind out of my sails a lot of the time in this viewing experience. It's kind of the one of the more forgettable films. The first film was by no means like a great film or even really a good film, but I found some charm in it, especially this time around in the most recent rewatch for the franchise and review. Again, this one just kind of is a step down, unfortunately. Like even Jason Momoa, I found felt like he was just kind of being a little too broy in this one. Like there wasn't that fearsome warrior I felt this time around that he was in the first film, and a lot of the like seriousness between, especially in like the relationship between him and his brother, felt very disingenuous, and it was a lot more like playful sibling relationship where I feel like we didn't quite earn that kind of dynamic yet between him and Orm. I feel like it would have been a lot more like heads butting, ideologies clashing, again much more akin to how it was in the first film. And then we also just didn't really have that kind of fish out of water, no pun intended again, concept of Arthur being the outcast from Atlantis. Like he's very much just kind of in society now. They still don't really accept him necessarily, but that's again not really explored at all in favor of other stuff. So yeah, I can't say that I recommend Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom for anyone that was interested in this last entry in the DCEU. Again, it's just there's a very few handful of films that I actually want to own on my shelf and want to actually revisit regularly in the years to come, like, and would look forward to rewatching again down the line. But yeah, and honestly, like the first Aquaman, I would love to own, and this one not as much. So yeah, please let me know what you thought of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom down in the comments below, or you can find me on the socials at No Score or at No Score Reviews. I'm also on Letterboxd. You can definitely go check out the YouTube channel as well if you're not already there, and watch my breakdown with my friend Cole of the entire DCEU, where we revisit every film in that universe, except for Blue Beetle, of course, because of kind of where it lies between cinematic universes. So if you want to hear my thoughts on the rest of the DCEU, be sure to go check that out. If you want to hear my thoughts on Blue Beetle, I do have a solo review of that as well up on the channel. I'll link that at the end of this video. But otherwise, yeah, thank you all so much for watching and or listening wherever you're doing so. And I hope you're all having a good holiday season, holiday break, whatever that means to you. Hoping you're getting some time off work. Be sure to also stay tuned to the channel for my year in review. I have got together with a bunch of guests that I've had on throughout the year to get their favorite picks of the year, be it movie, video game, or television show. And yeah, it's just one big kind of celebration of the best that this year had to offer in all of those entertainment fronts. So that'll be coming out in the last couple days of 2023. So be sure to keep an eye out or an ear out for that. Otherwise, thanks again so much for watching and listening, and we will see you all in the next one. Bye bye.